First Sergeant Kip here with Company D, 2nd United States Sharpshooters, and today we have something of a tool restoration refurbishment episode for you. Normally I don't really get into tool restoration, although as you can tell, I love to restore tools. But I think we're going to cover a lot of really useful information in this project, and I think maybe the next one that I might do on camera. So this last weekend, we had a wonderful event, and I also had the experience to come across some really cringe tools that were unsafe, abused, and definitely had seen better days. And I had the privilege of being asked by one of my favorite people in the hobby if I would take these tools that they recently acquired and do my best to bring them back to their former glory. And the bonus, I have full creative license in how I go about doing it. So it should be a lot of fun. But there's lots of good things to teach and learn along the way that I think all of you watching can learn, share, and implement in your reenacting tool knowledge to keep camp safe and tools functioning and cared for so that they serve their best purpose as you're trying to make a fire or dig a pit or build something at an event. So the first thing that kind of made me die a little bit on the inside was this beat up hewing hatchet. Now, at first glance, this is just a rusty old axe head. It's no big deal. I restore these sorts of things all the time. We'll get to the nasty bit, so trigger warning. So for those of you who are not familiar, a hewing hatchet is like a hewing axe, and it is beveled on one side and flat on the other, or should be. And that's typically used to make round logs square. This could be really handy in timber framing for cleaning up larger joints. It's pretty good for cutting shingles. And it's generally more of a woodworking tool than it is firewood processing or kindling processing. That said, you can, split kindling with it, but it's not something I'd be, splitting a cord of wood with or trying to drop a tree down with. There is a maker's mark on here. I'm going to do my absolute best to save what is left of a pretty faint impression. So we'll see how that goes. Looking at it, the primary bevel is pretty good shape. It doesn't look like they messed this up too badly. And as I was first looking at it, I was like, oh, well, they didn't mess up the back. Well, then I looked closer, and some unknowing person decided they would try to put a back bevel on a hewing hatchet. So these work best when you just have the one smooth face, so that way it cleans the wood, but it doesn't dig into the wood. We have clear signs of this being beat on, and even to the point where a whole chunk of the pole has been broken away, and some other marring that could have come. Sometimes this comes on when people are trying to make the head fit, or they're trying to set a handle into it. So that shouldn't be too bad, and especially once we get into it, I'm going to kind of smooth out all the edges so this doesn't have any sharp pieces to it. But for the most part, this is a sound axe head, hatchet head, and we got some room to work. So the first thing I'll do is I'll hit this with the wire wheel and see where we're at, and then probably dunk it in some Evapo rust for a night or two. Now, what should or could this axe head look like? Well, this is a regular user of mine in my woodworking, and this belonged to my grandfather. So we'll see what this axe head wants to look like. If I want to go to something more of a polished look, or something with a rust-free patina, we'll see what happens. Okay, so like I said, trigger warning. How was this hatchet hung? Well, are you ready for this? This is what it came off of. This bit of tear out is from me knocking the handle off. Is that? Oh, actually, it looks like it has some evidence that someone attempted to put a wedge in it. So to give you a sense, it was on a full-size axe handle. Someone looks like they burned it and put some sort of stain on it for either aesthetic or to make things old-timey, which drives me nuts because things during the Civil War were new during the Civil War. So, I mean, just look, I mean, it baffles my mind. My brain can't process how they got to this point and by what methods. And at no step of the way did they stop to think like, oh, is this a bad idea? Like, no, clearly they were full send every step of the way. And then, I mean, you can, this is how it came. And then people were using it this way. It's like, oh my gosh, someone can get hurt. So we'll replace this. This will become firewood. And I got just a off-the-shelf handle. I think the eye's a little short, but I think this is fine because this will give me an opportunity to demonstrate to everyone how you can build up an eye. Because sometimes, especially when you're working with historic edge tools, they're different forges, they didn't have a standardized eye size, more or less like they've had since the second half of the 20th century. So we'll show how to get that nice, perfect, no gap fit on a handle so it stays nice and safe and works its best, but this will come later. So let's go ahead and get started with some rust removal. As you've noticed, a lot of this axe head has filed pretty easily. Well, let me show you where you notice where the tool steel is forge welded into the head. So you can see back here how easy the file bites. But as you get towards the bit, you can hear it skate, dig, skate. So that's where you know where the tool steel is. And yes, this is a corn cob. They make good file holders. And they're cheap. Well, the hatchet head is out of the evaporust and looking pretty darn good. 100% rust free. I didn't go crazy with it. I mostly just focused on cleaning up the bevel. And of course, we got rid of all the nasty dings and deformations along all the edges. I actually had to spend quite a bit of time cleaning up the eye. Somehow this got wildly deformed, so that took a little bit of grinding. And then for these nasty chips, I just took them to my old hand crank grinder and just rounded them so they're nice and smooth and you won't hurt yourself on them. So this is good to go. But really the big reason I wanted to do this video is to talk about the importance of having tool handles fit properly because it's a safety thing. And what happens if you have a handle that isn't the right size? Well, it's really easy to add wood to it. So on this case, I just glued another piece of wood to the end of it. The narrow part of the eye wasn't long enough, and it's surprisingly common, especially with older axe heads, that you can go to like 5 different hardware stores and you won't find a perfect match for the eye. So the biggest thing is that the wood has to fill the eye completely. You need to have contact everywhere, otherwise it's going to rattle itself apart and would, probably just work poorly, but it could fly off and be dangerous. So what I did is I just took one of my hand saws and cut a nice square line down the edge of the handle and made a nice square cut here and glued a big old chunk of, I think this was oak that I had just in my scrap bin. And then I just carefully shaped it and formed it just like I would if I was hanging any other sort of handle. So we are ready for our final fit. And so now you can see that rather than that nasty handle that we started with, we have nice, perfect contact fore and aft on this handle. And you can see on the inside, there's a little plug of wood there, but if you do it right, it just kind of disappears when you hang it. But it won't rattle itself this way. And then all we got to do is put a wedge in here. The other thing that it's always important to do is take this terrible varnish off your handles. I've already done this one, but a card scraper makes short work of removing the varnish off the handles. The varnish is just on there so they look pretty at the store when they're trying to sell them and they don't get dirty over time from people holding them. But varnish handles are bad to use because, well, one, you can't really oil them because they're already coated in plastic. But they're also, like, they're not good for your hands. Like, hand on bare wood, bare oiled wood is really hard to get blisters. In fact, you know, going between like a varnished or a plastic or fiberglass handle and a traditional bare wood oil finish handle, the modern synthetics and coatings will give me a blister, but I've never gotten a blister from spending 4 hours splitting wood by hand with a nice wooden handle. So you just scrape it all off, and if you don't have one of these fancy card scrapers, just you can use a razor blade and just hold it at 90 degrees and scrape that varnish off, hit it with a little bit of sandpaper, cleaned off the finish off the bottom, rounded the edges. So now we are ready to put a wedge in this thing. I do like to glue my wedges in, and I typically use Type On 3 because it's a little thinner, so it has a little bit more lubrication as I set the wedge, but any type of wood glue is fine. And the other thing is, this is the stock wedge, which won't work because we made the handle wider. It's really important that your wedge fit the eye and not just the handle. So I made this custom, and I also cut the kerf for the wedge a little bit deeper than what it came with. So now all we got to do is set it. So I like to get it started and then flip the handle over, because this is how you set the head of the axe, which forces the head up. So if we set the wedge upside down, then everything is settling in the same direction. So you can see here that my wedge split. I'm not one of those people that worries about it. A split wedge just tells me that this thing was set all the way down as far as it possibly could go. So that means I have nice and good spread coming out to make sure that this handle stays in this axe head. So now, while the glue's still wet, I'll hit it with some sandpaper or my file, and then all of that will fill up any holes that there might be. So it'd be nice. It's makes its own wood filler. Now that we have our wedge in and everything's looking really nice, it is time for finish. You know, I'm going to use my favorite finish, which is boat soup. And this is equal parts pine tar, turpentine, and linseed oil. I like to keep in these condiment bottles because I use so much of it and it makes application really easy. So this has all sorts of good protective qualities, preservatives. The pine tar really keeps the bugs away, adds a little bit more water protection. And this is all that it needs. I'll put quite a few coats on it until the wood stops soaking it up. I got to get this back to the person I'm doing it for before I could do the standard every day for a week, every month, or every week for a month, and every month for a year sort of oiling process on this. But this should get it in a good way. So I have plenty of time to get this good and oiled. And you can see how that pine tar adds a nice little bit of tint to the wood as it gets all soaked in. And then I'll hit that eye now that the glue is all dried and let that soak in and swell up even more. And I'm ready to call this project done. I think this one came out pretty nice. It's definitely usable. It's safe. And I think we came a long way from what we started with to what we ended up with. I think this is a really nice hang. I think it will give its owner many, many years of good, reliable service. Since I've had this cleaned up and I've been staring at it for a while, I think the maker's mark says GW White on it. And so they would have been in operation from about 1836 to about, I think 1928. But I can't see enough of this or have enough research to actually say exactly when it was made. But looking at construction methods, I would say it would be very easily be a 19th century axe head or a early 20th century axe head. But this will be in good hands from here on out. The only thing I do wish I had time for, and if I did have time for, I would certainly do this, is make a leather axe sheath for this. I really believe every axe should have a sheath. They're super easy to make, and you don't have to make them fancy. And we even did a video on how to make one. It protects the edge, it protects the people around it, and I feel like there's a psychological benefit that if an axe has a sheath, then some unknowing person would be less tempted to just stab this into the ground. Like I see way too often outdoors, people really abusing their tools by thinking that the best place to store it is by chopping sod with it. But I'm going to keep oiling this until I return it. It'll be nice and ready to go. So I hope this video was informative and helpful. And if you are curious about more Civil War reenacting stuff, be sure to check us out on our website at secondusss.com. And we'll catch you on the next one.